Chapter 1, Genius and Destiny, line 1 to 38. Within 100-year lifespan in this earthly world, genius and destiny have a tendency to oppose each other. A turbulent mulberry field covered by sea period had passed. The things that we saw still deeply pain our hearts. It's not strange that beauty may beget misery. The jealous gods tend to heap spites on rosy-cheeked beauties. Turning scented pages of an old volume under an oil lamp, I started reading a long ago tale of love and romance. It was during the Qia Qing's rule of the Ming dynasty. The two capitals were stable, peace reigned in the country. There was a respectable townsman with surname Vuong. Of modest wealth, he belonged to the middle class of society. He had a son, the youngest, named Vuong Quan, to carry on the family lineage of Confucian scholars. The firstborns were two beautiful daughters. Tui Kieu the eldest, Tui Van the younger. Apricot slender in frame, snow pure in spirit. Each to her own charms, but both girls were perfect. Van's beauty was very remarkable. Her eyebrows, full crescent arcs, her moonlit face, oval. Jades tingled in her voice, flowers bloomed from her smile. Her speech, educated, chaste and refined. Clouds yielded to her hair's lustrous shine and flow. Snow ceded to the silky whiteness of her skin's glow. Kieu, the eldest, was especially witty and charming. Her talents and beauty even surpassed her sister. Her eyes, soul-deep liquid pools of autumn lake water. Her eyebrows, silhouettes of mountain crests in spring. Flowers envied her captivating looks. Willows grieved at her youthful freshness. One smile could rock a fortress and two a nation. Other girls might have comparable talents, but none could compare to her beauty's perfection. Endowed with intelligence gifted by the gods. Music, painting, poetry, and singing were her accomplishments. Well versed in music theory and the art of the moon lute, she composed a long music piece, named Thankless Fate, about the life of an ill-fated beauty, that would move the hearts of her listeners to pity. Nobly elegant and multi-talented were the two sisters. Although they both had reached the age of marriage, they stayed at home quietly behind closed curtains and drapes, not heeding the comings and goings of the bees and butterflies from the eastern wall nearby. Chapter 2, Damtian's Grave, lines 39 to 132. Like a sparrow moving back and forth on a spindle, spring days came and went ever so quickly. Already it was more than 60 days into the season. Young grass stretched a fresh greenness to the far horizon. On the pear branches, sprinkled a few white flowers. It's Qingming Day in March when the tombs of loved ones are visited and cleaned, and the festival, treading on the grass, is a celebration of spring. Near and far, young people were eager to go out on a walk. The two sisters also prepared for their spring day outing. The streets were full of well-dressed scholars and fair maidens. Horses and carriages moved unceasingly like water. The roads were jam-packed with people. As the two sisters came up to the burial mounds, ashes of golden rolls and paper money, scattered by the wind, lay all over the grounds. Gradually, the sun moved to the west. The sisters wistfully headed for home, pacing leisurely alongside a streamlet. The scenery was painting like delicate. Here, the water curved around a bend. There, a little bridge across the waters, at the far end. Suddenly, a lowly mound of earth on the trail side appeared, where the sad-looking grass looked half yellow and half green. Kieu asked, "Why is it that in the Qingming festival, there's no incense for this burial grave?" Vuong Quan, the youngest brother, replied, "'Tis the grave of Damtian, once a well-known songstress. She's renowned for her talents and beauty. Outside her door, there was no lack of butterflies and bees. But the fate of a beauteous woman has ever been fragile. In the mid of her blooming youth, the heavenly fragrant flower had departed from this world forever. There was a man from a faraway place. Attracted by her fame, he wanted to meet her. The love boat had just arrived in the harbor, but the brooch already broken, the vase shattered. Her empty room, lifelessly cold and silent. Green moss already started to cover the traces of horses and carriages of her admirers. The man shed tears and cried, "How regretful that we are not destined for each other. If we cannot in this lifetime be together, here's a token of love to inspire fate, to let us meet in some future lives and become heartmates." He then bought a rosewood coffin and arranged a lavish funeral. Countless sunrises and sunsets since then had passed. Her grave seldom saw any visitor as it was ownerless. Kieu's heart was already filled with some prior melancholy. After hearing the story, her pearl teardrops started to fall profusely. Alas! How painful is the destiny of a woman? It's said that an unhappy fate is our common lot. Alas! How pitiless the Creator is! To lay waste to a maiden's youth and wither her beauty. When alive, she's the wife of many a man. When dead, she becomes a ghost with not a single husband? Where are her ardent lovers now? Where are those beauty-craving admirers? As there's no one to think of her, I will burn a few incense sticks. Call it a meeting of sympathetic hearts on the road. Hopefully, she in the underworld will know. She muttered prayers in tones high and low, then made a bow before leaving the grave. Under the twilight, the grass was withered. The wind blew lightly through the shivering weeds. She pulled down a silver brooch from her hair, and carved on the tree a 4-line, 3-rhyme stanza. Then, as if falling into a state of enchantment, she stood motionless and lost herself in thought. Her lovely face turned sad and pensive. Immersed in sorrow, streams of pearly tears kept falling. Van said, "My sister, you are ridiculous, to have spare teardrops to weep for people of long ago." Kieu replied, "Since time immemorial, the cruelty of fate has never spared any woman. Just thinking of this makes me grieve. Seeing her lying there, I wonder what's in store for my future." Quan cut in, "My dear sister, each line you speak gets harder and harder on the ears. The atmosphere here is spirit-heavy and gloomy. Evening shadow descending and the way home still far." Kieu said, "Those talented elites. Their bodies may perish, but their spiritual essences will persist. Who knows if kindred souls will not together meet? Wait a little while, she may show herself soon." The words barely spoken with no forthcoming reply, when a strong whirlwind suddenly from nowhere arose. Violently, it shook the trees, causing flowers and leaves to fall, and threw whiffs of perfume in the air. Following the path the whirlwind took, they saw fresh and clear footprints on the moss. On seeing this, everyone was a little terrified. Kieu spoke, "This the power of true faith and trust. Sympathetic souls are bound to meet each other. If we're to be sisters, care not that we are from different worlds." In heartfelt gratitude to Damtian for showing her presence, Kieu added to the recent verses a few more lines. Her sensitive heart was full of feelings and inspiration. On the foot of the tree, an old-style poem was inscribed. Chapter 3, The Handsome Kim appeared, line 133 to 170, while half wanting to stay, half wanting to leave. A sweet melody from somewhere approached near. Seemed to be a young scholar riding on a horse, at a leisurely pace with hand loosened on the reins. Half a pocket of dreamer's moon and poet's wind, with a couple of page boys following him. His coat had a light scent of fresh grass. Its hue was that of the blue sky. His horse was the color of snow white. From afar, he had seen their faces. He dismounted and walked towards them. As the scholar's shoes moved over the grass meadow, the whole area seemed to be jade branches with gems glow. Quan knew him and came forward to greet. The two beauties, from maidenly shyness, behind the flowers, hid. "Actually, he's not really a stranger. He's Kim Trong, a descendant of a noble line. His family's wealthy, his genius well recognized. Famed for his literary skill, endowed with God-given intelligence. He's blessedly gifted and extraordinarily handsome. When at home, he's kind and courteous. When going out, he's winsome and generous. In fact, he lived in the same vicinity, and was a schoolmate of Vuong Quan. having long heard that his neighbor has 2 beautiful daughters, like the 2 Kieu of olden times, locked up in the Bronze Sparrow Tower. Only a few houses apart, but mountains and rivers lie in between. For quite some time, his heart's filled with love and dreams. A fortunate day to finally meet these angels. He's satisfied to see the heavenly fragrant flowers. From afar, he had seen their figures. Spring orchid and autumn daisy. Both are heart-captivating beauties. A meeting between a national beauty and a genius. Inwardly, they have fallen in love with each other, but outwardly, still showing shyness and reserve. His mind hazy as if half awake, half in a dream. Staying long not suitable, but leaving so difficult. The evening light seemed to hasten the parting's sadness. The scholar already on the horse and moving away. The beauties still gazing for a long while afterward. Under the bridge, the streamlet's crystal clear water flowed. By the bridge, willows swayed gracefully in the evening shadows. Chapter 4, Kieu Met Đạm Tiên in her dream, lines 171 to 242. When Kieu returned home to her maiden chamber, the sun had set behind the mountain, the town's dusk gongs had sounded. The slanted moon peeps through the window. Golden moonlight rippled on the water. The terrace filled with the trees' shadows. Camellia tree drooped its flowers over the neighbor's house. The dewdrops hung heavily on the swaying branches. Alone by herself, gazing at the moon, Kieu's heart's filled with recent events and faraway anxieties. If a person's life has such an ending, a lavish city life is but a life wasted. Whence he came and to what end that we should meet each other. In this life, will there be some chance for us to be together? With a heart full of hundreds of threads of feelings, Kieu composed a beautiful poem to express her state of being. As the waning moon showed its slanted shape through the curtain, leaning against the sill, Kieu fell into a slumber. Suddenly, out of nowhere, appeared a young and beautiful damsel. She looked quite graceful with striking elegance. Her face infused in mist, her skin white like snow. Small golden lotus feet seemed to glide on the ground, sometimes coming closer, sometimes moving farther away. In joyful surprise, Kieu welcomed her. "Coming from the fairyland, which a stray path leads you here?" She replied, "Those of the same temperament and situation. We had met just earlier today, have you already forgotten? My poor abode is westward of your house. Above it is a bridge, with water flowing underneath. My deep thanks for your sympathetic heart, and for your beautiful verses like gold and pearls. I told our league's chief about you. He told me your name's also in the heartbreaking destiny list. It's predestined that we should meet. We are people of the same league, of the same boat. Here's 10 new poetry themes that's just posted. Fairy verses will need your skill with the flower pen." Looking over the themes, Kieu consented. Her fairy hand danced rapidly over the paper, completing the 10 poems in a flash. After reading the poems, the girl silently praised. "A beautiful heart with extraordinary poetic skill. If these poems are in the heartbreaking destiny book, she will win the first prize trophy, yielding to none." At the doorway, the girl had turned to leave, but Kieu still tried to keep her to stay for more heart-to-heart. When the wind from somewhere suddenly blew on the curtain, Kieu woke up and realized she was in a dream. Looking about for the girl, but she's neither here nor there, although her fragrance still seemed to linger in the air. All alone, reflecting on this and that in the late night, she thought of her distant future and became terrified. A leaf swept by the wind, a flower drifting in the water. Would that be my fate in this life? She kept mulling over. Endless waves of innermost feelings swamp her heart. As she reflected on life's paths, she started to sob. Her crying reached her mother's chamber, who woke up and asked, "What's the matter? Why are you still up at night? And your flower face wet with tears?" Kieu replied, "Your little daughter hasn't yet repaid filial duties to father and mother. This afternoon, we visited Đạm Tien's grave. Then tonight, I saw her in a dream. Mother, what's the heartbreaking destiny book about? And those sad themes she gave me to compose poems for, based on what happened in the dream. I think my future will be nothing but dismal. Mother taught, what groundless, absurd dreams? Why, because of nothing put worries and distress into your heart. Kieu listened to her mother's counsel and stopped grieving. Hardly had sorrow left, she began to think of love. Outside the window, orioles were gently chirping. On the side wall, the catkin flew over to neighbor's house. The moon cast its slanted shadow on the veranda. All by herself with inmost thoughts abound, she felt so alone. Chapter 5, Kim Trọng in Love, line 243 to 300. It's well known that for those who are romantics, who could unravel the threads of love in their hearts? Since he returned home from the chance meeting, she was constantly in his thoughts and his feelings. The more he tried to shake off sorrow, the more it grows. Like 3 autumns compressed in a day, it was drearily slow. Heavy drapes shrouded her window like a wall of clouds. Each night, he dreamed of a glimpse of her at her house. A month had already passed by. Depression filled his heart. He yearned to see her face but could not. His study room had the cold feel of metal. Ink brush tips dried, lute strings out of tune. A light wind blew through the blinds, creating a nostalgic melody. Fragrance aroused longing, tea lacked its usual taste. If it's not predestined love for 3 lives, why such heavenly beauty to tease one's heart? Feeling wistful for the special place of first meeting her, he left his house hurriedly to go there. The place now covered with lush green grass. Clear water flowed under the bridge. But nothing else about her to see? The evening breeze seemed to invoke melancholy. The lonely reeds swaying in mocking affirmation. A sudden desire to see her filled his heart. He hurriedly headed towards the blue bridge to her house asterisk. Deep and austere looking, with closed gates and high walls. So ended the chance of seeing and talking with her. Leaves of willows drooping, forming a natural curtain. An oriole chirped mockingly from a tree branch. Behind several closed gates, somewhere was her chamber. The front yard was filled with fallen flowers. But she's nowhere to be seen. He stood there for a long while, then strolled around. Suddenly he saw, behind the backyard, there's a house. It belonged to Viet Ngo, a businessman. The owner's away and the house is empty. He rented it as a student from another town. With his lute, books, and belongings, he moved into the place. The landscaping's in a good state with grass, rocks, and trees. A terrace named View Tui in golden letters still fresh. Joyful of such a happy coincidence. He wished, it must be love ordained by heaven. From his room window, he kept watching the eastern wall each day. So near to her, yet it seemed like 10,000 miles away. For the fairy cave was closed even to the wind. It's now 2 full moons since he'd moved in. And yet, not even, of her shadow, a single glimpse. One serene day, looking over the wall, he saw a graceful figure flitting by the peach tree. He put down his lute, tidied his dress, and rushed out. The perfume still lingered strongly, but she was gone. He walked around the wall. On the peach tree lay a silver hair brooch. He stretched his hand and took it home. From which maiden's chamber came this? It must be she to have this precious thing. If not a predestined love, it wouldn't be this easy to fall into one's hands. Lying sleepless, he kept fondling the brooch. It still had her lingering scent. Chapter 6, Kieu Met Kim Trọng, line 301 to 362. At early dawn, Kim saw her, when the fogs just cleared. By the wall, she seemed a little puzzled as she searched far and near. Kim has been waiting for her to appear all night. He raised his voice over the wall to sound out her mind. A silver brooch I've just found. How would one know? For the pearl to be returned, where's Union Town? From the other side, Kieu replied, I'm grateful, for a gentleman's heart that doesn't care for dropped things. The brooch is worth only a few farthings. But the noble-heartedness of a gentleman is highly esteemed. Kim replied, we are close neighbors. just next door and not at all distant strangers. A chance fortune for me to find a lost brooch, to compensate for the sorrow in my heart all this time. It'd been so long for me to wait for this day. Please stay a while, to converse and let us get to know one another better. He hurriedly went back and take a few things from his room. A velvet piece of cloth with 2 golden bracelets from his heirlooms. With a ladder, he stealthily climbed over the wall. Is she not the very person he met that day? On recognizing him, she became shy and a little embarrassed. He gazed at her, while she shyly bowed her head. Kim said, "Since our chance encounter at the festival, my heart's been longing for you all this time. Lovesickness is wearing my body thin. If I just wait, who knows if there would be a today. A full month already passed by since we met. I had to dare for a chance to see and talk with you. And now, do please grant me this. Would a noble pedestaled mirror shine on a humble duckweed?" After a while, she hesitantly replied, "My family's poor but our ways are snow pure. Even if 2 persons are in love with one another, its outcome will depend on father and mother. I'm grateful for your affection. I'm but a child and do not know really what to reply." Kim said, "Yesterday's windy, tomorrow may be rainy. A spring day like this does not, by any chance, come easy. Even if you do not consider my infatuation, it's bad for me, but is it of use to anyone? We could first bind our affection, and then form a plan of action. Even if God does not take pity on our love, we will dare to let go of our spring of youth in this life. If your heart insists on being so strict, my efforts for your love, would it not be very wasted?" Quietly listening to his sweet words, gentle like a lullaby, feelings of love reflected in the shyness of her eyes, she said, "This a new and strange day. Respecting your feelings for me, my heart cannot bear to withstand your affection. As I have received love from a true-hearted gentleman, you have my golden vow of faithful love henceforth." On hearing her words, the anxiety knots in Kim's heart were gone. He took out the brooch, pink cloth, and put them into her hands, saying, "A lifetime of our relationship starts from this day. These are the tokens to mark our love." In her hand was already a velvet cloth, and a silk fan. With her hairpin, they immediately exchanged gifts. Asterisk. Their love vows were scarcely spoken, when from the back of the house, voices were heard. Hurriedly they left, brushing against leaves and flowers. He returned to his study room, and she departed from her chamber. Chapter 7. Kieu went to Kim's house, line 363 to 428. Since they shared their feelings for each other, love in their hearts became deeper, and their minds often wandered. The longing river, although not very wide, each side kept thinking and waiting for the other side. A wall lay in between with blocking snow and hiding fog. It's hard for them to have news of each other. Windy days and moonlit nights gradually passed by. With summer's lush green, spring was over. Today's birthday on her mother's family side. Her parents, brother, and sister will be going to the party. A bustling day, dressing up and preparing for the trip. To present a gift with sincere best wishes. Alone by herself in the house, Kieu thought the opportunity to meet Kim has been left for today. She prepared delicacies and fruits in her chamber, then walked quickly to the dividing wall. She just scarcely called out in a low tone his name, to find that he was already, by the flowers, waiting. He complained that she has been lukewarm to him, to let their love relationship be cold for so long. His heart's been alternating between longings and sorrows. Half of his head will soon become white with fog and snow. She replied, "The wind kept me, the rain detained me. I'm sorry for letting you down all this time. But today, no one's at home. I come out here to return with gratitude your affection." She then walked around the garden's miniature mountain. At the wall's end, there's a gate that's just fenced. She rolled up her sleeves and opened the gate, then pushed the clouds aside to see clearly the way to fairyland. Their faces brightened as they looked at each other. Greeting wishes were said, and inquiries about health and weather. Shoulder to shoulder, They walked back to his study room, conversing about poetry and their love vows by mountain and river. On a side table lay various ink cups and pen brushes. Hanging on the wall was a painting of cedar trees. Their strengths and exposure to wind and fog were expressed naturally. As she gave praises for the brush strokes, the more she looked, the more vibrantly fresh she found them to be. Kim said, "The painting was drawn just a little while ago. Please grace it with a few words to enhance its beauty." Her fairy hand flew quickly like the blowing wind, the falling rain. On the painting soon appeared a new quatrain. Kim praised, "Your thoughts flow in gems. Even Miss Ban, Miss Ta are not equal to that?" Asterisk. If in previous lifetimes, had I not done a lot of good things, I would not have the happiness of being together with you. She replied, "Just from a hidden glance of your face, I think that if you will not become a royal court's member, then at least you will be an honored official. As for me, my fate's thin like a grasshopper. Don't know if God will grant us a future together." I remembered when I was young and naive. There was a fortune teller who said to me, "When talent and beauty outwardly exudes in full glamour, an unhappy fate's in store for its owner. Looking at you and now thinking of me. One's thick, one's thin, should we really be together?" Kim replied, "Destiny give us our chance encounter." Since ancient times, stories of human willpower overcoming their fates are many. If we face unsurmountable difficulties, then we will dare to risk our lives. They talked about many big and small things. Hearts in love, feeling light and happy with several drinks. The joyous days too short, not even a full hand's size. The sun already set beyond the west sky. It then seemed not quite proper to stay overly long. She reluctantly said goodbye and headed for home. Chapter 8, Kieu's Love Pledge with Kim, line 429 to 462. On arriving home, she heard the news. Her parents still at the party and will not return for the night. She let down her room's door curtain, then walked hurriedly through the night garden. The moon, shining on the treetops, cast thick and thin shadows. The oil lamp in Kim's study room weakly flickered. Resting against a table, Kim started to doze. Half awake, half drunk with wine and love. Her lotus footsteps echoed in his sleep. The moonlight waned, the pear flower approaching near. Still wistful for a mountain fairy's love for a human king. Kieu's sudden arrival appeared to be in a loving dream. Kieu said, in the empty silence of the night, "Cause of flower I have to dare a path to find flower. Now, we see each other, face to face, clearly. Who knows if some tomorrow, it will not be just a dream." Kim was overjoyed, and with ceremony, he invited her in. He put more oil in the lotus lamp, and burned some incense. Then, they together composed the love vows onto paper. With the silver knife, she cut and gave him strands of her hair. The moon was shining brightly in the sky. They spoke their vows together as if of one mind. Then they asked many little things in the other's heart, and promised for their entire life to love and be faithful to each other. As they drank and talked into the night, he became aroused by her fragrance and her mirror's reflection. Kim said, "Gentle breeze in a clear moonlit night. For a long time, there's still in my heart a little unsatisfied. I have not yet brought the jade pestle to the blue bridge." Asterisk. "I'm afraid it may sound improper, this wish." She replied, "Like the stories of red marriage binding threads. A vow sufficient to bind us to each other. Just don't ask for anything indecent. Other than that, I would not regret obliging you anything." Chapter 9, The Music of Kieu, line 463 to 496. Kim said, "I heard of your famous talent at the moon lute. If my Zhongziki ears can have the pleasure of hearing you play." Asterisk. She replied, "Just a small talent, of little worth. But since you ask, I will gladly obey." On the wall, a moon lute's already hanging. Kim hurriedly took it down, and raised it to the level of his eyebrows. Kieu said, "This just a petty and private talent of mine. Your high regards make my heart feels burdened and surprised. She started with the tuning of the lute, adjusting the 4 strings to their musical tone scales. Whence the melody that revives the Han, Chu battlefields. The sounds of steel swords clashing can be heard. Whence the melody of Suma's love plea for Phoenix. Isn't there a tinge of bitterness and sorrow? Here's Kuang Ling melody composed by Chi Kong. Its music, flowing like a river, floating like the clouds. Here's Chao Chun's melody on crossing the country's border. Half's longings for the king, half's for her home. Clear like the sound of a crane flying by. Thick like the waterfall in the middle of its descent. Unhurried like a gentle breeze passing outside the door. Quick and hurried like it's raining hard and heavy. The oil lamp sometimes bright, sometimes dark. Making the person sitting there also feels sad. Sometimes he rested his elbows on his knees. Sometimes he bowed his head. Sometimes his insides felt all twisted up. Sometimes his eyebrows curled up in a frown. He said, "It's good, exceeding good. But it's so full of bitterness and sorrow. Why play such a mournful piece, to make your heart heavy and the listeners unsettled?" Kieu replied, "A bad habit I'm accustomed to. Sad or joyous, it's my endowed nature, what can I do? But your words are golden advice, I will keep them in my heart." Kim said, "Please do try to make it less bitter and distressful." Chapter 10, Don't Treat Love as a Game, line 497 to 524. Her flower scent became increasingly fragrant in the night. Gazing into her sparkling eyes, his love turned into fire. Waves of desire swept through his heart. As he cuddled her, his growing lust began to show. Kieu said, "Don't treat our love as a game. Please stand away from me and let me finish my say. Nothing so precious about a mere peach blossom flower. The peach garden doesn't dare to fence itself from the bluebirds. But as you want me to be your future wife, the rules of good wife ethics put chastity first. If a woman's easy with granting sexual favors, then who would ever want to marry her? Love relationships not a temporary eat then leave place. The chastity of a lifetime, how can one forsake it in a day? Think of notable love stories from the past to the present. Which couples are better matched than Sui and Chang? Pre-marriage sex had destroyed their love for each other. She obliged him too much, so he got tired of her. Even while they were together and passionately in love, he looked down on her in his heart. The West Chamber grows cold with broken vows, turning an affectionate love into a shameful one. If a lady fights to protect her chastity against her future husband, when they're married, she'd feel ashamed, and because of whom? Please? Why hurry in making demands for sexual pleasure? While I'm alive, I promise one day you will get your due. Upon hearing her sweet and virtuous words, she gained his respect to the fullest. Chapter 11, Kim's uncle's death, line 525 to 572. As the silver moonlight turned pale along the roof eaves, they heard someone urgently calling from outside the front gate. She hurried back to her chamber, while Kim rushed across the peach flower yard. As soon the brushwood gate got opened, a young family servant came in with a letter from home, and brought news of Kim's uncle's death while living abroad. Kim's father bade him to go to Liaoyang, a distant land beyond the hills and valleys, to bring back his uncle's remains and help in the obsequies. The news completely astounded Kim. He quickly went to Kieu's house, to tell her in detail the entire story, of his uncle's death, his duties in the family mourning, and his feelings on being far away. "We've only been a few times together. Yet now, we have to part from each other. No chance for us yet to tie the marriage silk threads. But the moon that we exchanged our love oaths by, will always be up there, watching us from the far sky. When I'm thousands of leagues away, each day without you will be like 3 winters. Alas, when will the threads of my grief be unraveled? Please do take precious care of yourself, my love, so I, at the world's ends, can be at ease." On hearing those words, her heartstrings entangled in knots. Mood uncertain, she expressed her feelings and thoughts. The god of nuptials, why does he hate us so? The joy of union not yet felt, the sorrow of parting already suffered. Together, we made a sacred oath. Though my hair will turn gray one day, my love for you will always stay. It matters not if I have to wait months and years. I only grieve for your journey's hardships. We had pledged to each other a unanimous heart. This life, I will never play my lute abroad another man's boat. As long as mountains and rivers still exist. Come back, remembering her who's with you today. Lingering hands in hands, not wanting to part, till the sun stood directly above the roof. Each footstep taking them farther apart. Each farewell inciting streams of tears. In haste, Kim saddled his horse and tied his bags. They parted ways, with their grief split into half. Feeling sad as he looked at the foreign landscape. On the tree branches, many cuckoos gathered. At the sky's horizon, only some swallows. Grief for him, who journeys through wind and rain. Each day, longings of love weighed down the heart. While she was still standing against the west porch, her heartstrings twisted like entangled silk threads. Through the window, she gazed at the mists and beyond. She saw a washed-out flower, a willow gaunt and pale yellow.